The glass doors of Sentara slid open with a soft, sighing chime. Junho Kang stepped through, and the very air in the exclusive perfumery seemed to freeze. He was a monument of implied violence in a sanctuary of scent, his black tailored suit absorbing the soft, golden light. The lone assistant arranging crystal bottles behind the counter flinched, her hands turning to ice. She knew the sharp planes of his face from whispered warnings. The Viper. His territory was the city's underworld, not this delicate world of fragrance. He told himself he was here for a new signature scent, a strategic move to mark a new era for his syndicate. It was a lie, and he knew it. He adjusted his cuff, his movements lethally precise, his cold gaze already dismissing the opulent displays. He was ready to complete this flimsy errand and leave when a voice, warm and deep like honeyed rum, cut through the silence from behind a velvet curtain. "Welcome to Sentara. Are you searching for a new signature?" He froze. Not just his body, but something deep inside him. Something he had buried, locked solid. It was the texture of her voice, the way it vibrated in the perfumed air and settled directly in his bones. The owner emerged. She was tall, with skin like polished teak and long, intricate braids that framed a face of stunning confidence. Her name, he would later learn, was Zahara. She moved with an innate authority that made the luxurious space feel intensely personal. Her smile was not one of submission, but of bold, open curiosity. "How can I help you today, sir?" That was the moment it happened. The snap was almost audible inside his skull. For months, he had been a ghost. A brutal, targeted poisoning by his rivals, the Black Cobras, had left his nervous system in ruins. The doctors, with their charts and grim diagnoses, had been final. "The neurological damage is severe, Mr. Kang. The pathways for certain visceral autonomic responses are severed. You will likely never function as a man in that capacity again." His body had become a gilded cage, a betrayal that left him feeling less than human. Gorgeous, ambitious women had tried to seduce the legend, only to be met with a hollow, shameful silence. They always left, their whispers of pity carving another scar into his soul. But now, here, just from the sound of this woman's voice, his body reacted with a fierce, undeniable, uncontrollable force. A jolt of pure, undiluted life surged through him, a hardening, burning sensation he hadn't felt in years. It was a resurrection that felt both glorious and terrifying. Panic, cold and sharp, seized him. His jaw clenched. A fine sweat prickled on his brow. He lowered his gaze instantly, unable to bear the directness of her kind, curious eyes. His chest tightened, not from fear of her, but from the seismic shock of his own awakening. What is this? What is she doing to me? "Sir, are you okay?" Zahara tilted her head, her expression one of genuine concern. Her voice was gentle, yet firm, the kind of voice that demanded truth. He couldn't speak. He couldn't form a single thought that wasn't drowned out by the roaring in his ears and the frantic drum of his own heart. His breath caught as if he'd been punched in the gut. Without a word, he turned abruptly, his movements stiff with a humiliation he hadn't felt since boyhood, and stormed toward the door. The chime of his exit was a soft, mocking sound. "My sweethearts, my beautiful family, welcome to Afro-Korean cinema. You're about to witness our very first story. If you believe in love that can heal any wound, you're in the right place. Do us a huge favor. Subscribe and hit that like button right now. Let's begin." Inside, Zahara blinked, completely stunned. "What on earth?" she muttered under her breath, placing her hands on her hips. "Did I scare him away?" That night, Junho sat in the cavernous silence of his penthouse, a glass of expensive whiskey trembling in his hand. The neon kingdom of Seoul glittered below him, a prize won with blood, but it felt like ash in his mouth. The scene replayed in his mind on a relentless loop. Zahara's confident stance, her voice, the warmth in her eyes, and the shameful, glorious truth that had followed. For the first time in years, his body had responded. He had felt alive. He slammed the glass down, the crystal cracking the polished obsidian of his table. "This isn't real," he growled to the emptiness. "A phantom feeling, a trick of the mind." But no matter how many times he repeated the doctor's cold words, he couldn't erase the memory of that fire. 2 days passed in a fog. He couldn't eat. He couldn't focus during meetings where his lieutenants discussed territorial disputes and debt collections. They noticed his distraction, the uncharacteristic silence, but none dared to speak of it. Finally, desperate and angry, he called his doctor. "You're saying you experienced a physical reaction? To a woman's voice?" The doctor's tone was thick with skepticism. "Yes." Junho's single word was sharp enough to cut. "Impossible, Mr. Kang. Your scans don't lie. The nerve damage is extensive and permanent. It must be psychosomatic. A powerful mental trigger creating a phantom sensation. Nothing more." But Junho knew what he had felt. The fire was too real, too visceral. He leaned back in his leather chair, rubbing his temples. Delusional, perhaps. But he was a man of action, and he couldn't deny the primal pull. He needed to see her again. He needed to know if it would happen again. 2 days later, the pull was an ache he could no longer ignore. Junho found himself standing outside Sentara again, his heart pounding like a drum. He walked in, the chime sounding louder this time. Zahara looked up from arranging a display. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, followed by a warm, professional smile. "Welcome back." He merely gave a stiff nod, his throat too tight to form words. The same electric hum started under his skin the moment her voice reached him. He walked straight to a shelf, grabbed the first 2 bottles his hand touched, and brought them to the counter. "Just these," he muttered, his voice rough, his eyes fixed on the cash register. She simply nodded, wrapped them silently, and took his payment. As he took the bag, their fingers brushed. It was like a lightning strike to his dead nerves. A jolt of pure, undiluted fire surged through him, and in his pants his manhood stirred, hardening with a fierce, painful intensity he had not felt in years. It was a brutal, shameful, and glorious resurrection. He flinched back as if burned, turned on his heel, and fled without another word, the entire transaction taking less than a minute. From the parked car across the street, his head bodyguard, Minsik, watched the entire exchange through the boutique's glass front. He saw his boss's stiff posture, the rushed purchase, the abrupt, almost frantic exit. It was bizarre. The Viper was never frantic. Inside, Zahara stared at the closed door, her fingertips still tingling from the strange electric brush of his hand. "What a strange, strange man," she whispered to herself, her curiosity now fully ignited. The following week, he found himself back at Sentara. This time, he came without his armored car, without his guards. A Mafia boss walking alone and exposed. It was an unprecedented risk, but for the first time, the risk of not going felt greater. The door chimed, and once again, her voice found him, wrapping around him like a physical touch. Back again. Zahara's lips curved into a teasing smile. She wore a fitted crimson dress that celebrated her curves, and her eyes sparkled with open amusement. "I didn't think the great Junho Kang was the type to be so dedicated to his fragrance profile." He stiffened, his heartbeat a wild, frantic rhythm against his ribs. It happened again. Instantly. A surge of heat, a powerful, unmistakable stirring at the mere sound of her voice. He felt a hot blush creep up his neck and, in a panic, grabbed the nearest bottle from a shelf. "I'll take this," he muttered, staring fixedly at the counter. Her laughter was a rich, melodic sound that seemed to light up the room. "Are you sure? That's velvet bloom. It's one of our most popular florals for women. Unless you're planning to gift it?" Her eyes twinkled with mischief. His ears burned. He tossed the bottle onto the counter as if it were scalding him, then grabbed another at random, and another, piling them up. "These. I'll take all of these." He would buy the entire store if it created a barrier between her and his shocking, undeniable reaction. "Hey!" Zahara leaned forward, resting her elbows on the glass counter, her expression shifting to one of genuine intrigue. "You know, most men don't come to a custom perfumery alone, and certainly not you. Why is Seoul's most feared man suddenly a frequent visitor to my shop?" The boldness of her question made his breath hitch. No one spoke to him like this. No one. And yet, instead of the cold fury that was his default, he felt a spark of something else, a thrilling, terrifying sense of being seen. That night, as he carried bags of perfumes he would never open, his men exchanged confused glances. But Junho ignored them. His mind, his heart, his very body were trapped in a loop. Her voice, her smile, her teasing. For the first time in years, Junho the Viper Kang felt powerless. And the most terrifying part was, he didn't hate it. The next morning, the sleek black Audi R8 was parked across the street from Sentara an hour before opening. Inside, Junho watched the early light glint off the shop's sign. He'd spent a night tormented, not by threats or business, but by the phantom scent of Zahara's perfume, a mix of vanilla, oud, and something uniquely her, clinging to his memory. He'd replayed the feel of her fingers, the shock in her eyes when he'd fled. He, who never retreated, had run from a woman thrice. He saw her arrive. She moved with an easy grace, unlocking the door, her form silhouetted against the warm light she turned on inside. His body tightened instantly, a Pavlovian response that was equal parts humiliation and desperate hope. He didn't move. He just watched. A predator studying the one creature in the forest that didn't fear his shadow. A black van was parked at the back. Inside, the Black Cobra operative watched through tinted glass. The operative's eyes narrowed as he saw the Viper pause, his hand on the car door, and glance back at the shop. For a long moment, the most feared man in Seoul simply stood there, his gaze locked on the woman inside. Then he finally slid into his car, but the engine didn't start. The car sat idling, as if he was unable to leave. The operative lifted his radio, his voice low and sure. He's not just visiting. He's captivated. He just sat in his car, watching the shop. He can't pull himself away. The woman isn't just a point of contact. She's an obsession, a confirmed and profound vulnerability. This was no longer just a suspicion. It was a tactical fact. The weakness had been identified, and it was deeper than they had imagined. Later that day, Junho stood in his conference room, a digital map of the city glowing on the wall. His lieutenants were tense, reporting on Black Cobra movements near the docks. "They're getting bold, boss," Minsik said, his voice low. "They're testing our borders." Junho's gaze was fixed on the map, but he wasn't seeing shipping lanes. He was seeing the way Zahara's braids had fallen over her shoulder when she'd laughed at him. "Let them test," he murmured, his voice distant. The men around the table exchanged uneasy glances. This wasn't the Viper. The Viper would have already been planning a retaliatory strike, a show of brutal force. This man was distracted. "Sir?" Minsik pressed gently. "The shipment?" Junho's eyes flickered back to the present, a cold mask slamming down over his features. "Handle it. I don't care how. Just make the problem disappear." He stood, the movement abrupt. "I'm going out." He didn't wait for a response or for his guards to assemble. He walked out alone, the echo of his footsteps in the marble hallway a solitary sound. The drive to Sentara was a blur. This time, when he entered, the chime felt like a heartbeat. Zahara was with a client, but her eyes found his the moment he walked in. She finished her conversation with a polished smile and glided over to him. Today, she wore a deep purple blouse that made her skin glow. "We have to stop meeting like this," she said, her voice a low, intimate tease. "People will talk." He said nothing, the familiar heat already spreading through him, a fire lit by her mere presence. He walked past her to a display of raw ingredients, small glass vials of essential oils. "I want to commission a scent," he said, his voice rough. "A custom one." Her eyebrows rose. This was different. This wasn't panic buying. This was a request for a process, for time. "A custom scent is intimate, Mr. Kang. It requires multiple sessions. We have to find what speaks to you." "I understand." "Okay," she said, a slow smile playing on her lips. She gestured to 2 plush velvet chairs in a private alcove. "Then let's begin. Close your eyes." He stiffened. Closing his eyes meant vulnerability. It meant surrendering control. "Trust me," she said softly, and the words were a key turning in a rusty lock. He sat, and after a moment's hesitation, he closed his eyes. The world went dark, and his other senses heightened. He heard the rustle of her clothes, the soft clink of glass. And then he smelled it. A scent strip was waved gently under his nose. Citrus, sharp and clean. "What do you feel?" Her voice murmured close to his ear. "You. I feel you." "It's sharp," he managed. Another strip. Leather, dark and familiar. "This one?" "Power," he grunted. It smelled like his car, his office, his world. A third strip. This one was different. A warm, spicy, incredibly sensual blend of amber and vanilla. It was her. It was the very air around her. The reaction was instantaneous and violent. His eyes flew open. His breath hitched. He could feel the color draining from his face, his body responding with an intensity that was almost painful. He stared at her, his gaze wide, almost wild. Zahara's professional mask slipped. She saw it. She saw the raw, unchecked shock in his eyes. She leaned in, her own curiosity overriding caution, and gently took his wrist. His pulse was a frantic bird beating against her fingers. "Your skin," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "We have to see how it reacts with your skin chemistry." Before he could pull away, she spritzed the amber vanilla scent onto his wrist. The cool mist was a shock, then a warmth as it met his skin. Then she did the unthinkable. She leaned in, her braids brushing against the sleeve of his suit, and brought her nose to his skin. She inhaled. Junho stopped breathing. Her warmth, her proximity, the intimate act of her smelling him. It was too much. The fire in him burned white-hot. He was hard, aching, fully, undeniably alive under her scrutiny. He snatched his hand back as if burned, shooting up from the chair. "I have to go," he choked out, his voice strangled. He practically ran from the alcove, tossing a black credit card onto the main counter. For the process, he barked at the stunned assistant and fled into the safety of the city's noise. Zahara stood in the alcove, her heart hammering. She could still smell him on the air, his own clean, soapy scent mixed with the warm, spicy amber. She looked at the empty chair, then down at her own hands. "What on earth?" she whispered. "Are you so afraid of?" Across the street in the now familiar black van, a Black Cobra operative lowered his camera. He had a perfect shot of Junho Kang's face through the window, a face not of cold fury, but of stunned, vulnerable shock. He had a shot of the woman leaning intimately close to him. "He's not just visiting," the operative said into his radio. "He's sitting with her, letting her touch him. He's compromised. The woman is definitely the key." The trap was now set. The rain came down in relentless, heavy sheets, turning the neon lights of Seoul into blurred watercolors. Junho stood just inside the doorway of Sentara, the session having run later than intended. The spicy, intoxicating scent of his developing custom fragrance, her fragrance, still clung to his skin, a constant, maddening reminder of his own awakening. He had stayed through the entire process today, his body a live wire of sensation, fighting to maintain a stoic expression as Zahara moved around him, her fingers occasionally brushing his as she passed him scent strips. "Still can't decide on a bass note, can you?" She had teased, her eyes knowing. He had merely grunted in response, the only sound he trusted himself to make. Now, as he prepared to step into the downpour, a primal sense of warning, one honed from years of surviving ambushes, prickled at the back of his neck. It was too quiet on this side street. The usual traffic sounds were muted, the shadows between buildings too deep. He stepped out. The van door slid open with a violent metallic shriek that cut through the drumming rain. Black-clad figures poured out, their faces obscured by masks, lead pipes and knives gleaming in their hands. Black cobras. Junho's instincts took over. The civilized man, the one who sat for scent profiles, vanished. The viper struck. He moved with a brutal, economical grace, disarming the first man with a sharp crack to the wrist, using the man's own body as a shield against a swinging pipe. He was a whirlwind of controlled violence, his every move a sentence of death. Two men fell, groaning into the wet pavement. But they were prepared. There were too many. As he twisted to avoid a knife, a second assailant brought a pipe down hard on his already injured side. White-hot agony ripped through him, the old wound screaming in protest. He staggered, his breath hissing through clenched teeth. He fought on, a cornered beast, his rage painting the rainy night red, but his strength was faltering, his movements slowing as blood seeped through his expensive shirt, a dark, spreading stain. A car horn blared from the main road, its headlights cutting through the storm. The remaining attackers scattered like cockroaches, melting back into the shadows from whence they came. Gasping, leaning against the wet brick wall for support, Junho fumbled for his phone. He should call Minsik. He should summon his men, unleash hell upon the black cobras. But his vision swam, the warm, coppery taste of blood in his mouth. The only thing his reeling mind could latch onto was not the cold efficiency of his syndicate, but the warm, golden light of Sentara, the scent of amber and vanilla. Her. It was the most reckless, illogical decision of his life. He pushed himself off the wall, leaving a smeared handprint of blood and rain, and stumbled back toward the perfumery's door. He didn't knock. He slumped against it, the glass shuddering under his weight. Inside, Zahara was closing the cash register. The sound made her jump. Her eyes widened in horror at the sight of him through the glass, soaked, pale, bleeding heavily. She rushed forward, fumbling with the lock before pulling him inside. Junho, oh my God, what happened? Her voice was sharp with a fear that felt strangely personal. Nothing, he slurred, teeth chattering from pain and cold. Just a scratch. A scratch? She snapped, her fear morphing into fierce anger. You're bleeding all over my floor. But her hands were already moving, pulling him toward the velvet chairs in the alcove. He collapsed into one, his breath shallow. The mighty viper, reduced to a shivering wounded man in her elegant chair. Her heart hammering against her ribs, Zahara ran to the back room and returned with a first aid kit. Her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. Take off your jacket and shirt. He let out a pained, faint smirk. You're bold. Don't you dare joke with me right now, she hissed, her eyes blazing. Do it. With a grimace, he obeyed, peeling off the blood-soaked layers. Zahara's breath caught. His torso was a map of violence, old, silvery scars crisscrossing his skin, a testament to a life she could only imagine, and the fresh, angry gash on his side, weeping blood. She cleaned the wound, her touch firm yet gentle. He hissed, his whole body tensing, his jaw clenched so tight she thought it might break. Hold still, she murmured, her tone softening as she saw the true extent of the damage. You act like you're made of stone, but you bleed just like the rest of us. For a long moment, their eyes locked in the intimate quiet of the shop. The space between them vanished, heavy with unspoken things. Why didn't you go to your men? She asked, her voice barely a whisper as she began to bandage the wound. Why come here? He swallowed hard, his dark eyes burning into hers, all pretense gone. Because I trust you. The words hung in the air, simple, profound, and devastating. Her breath caught. In them was a weight she knew he had never given to another soul. As she finished, her hands lingered on his bare skin, tracing the story of his survival written in scars. Her fingers brushed against a particularly old, deep one near his heart. You're crazy, she whispered, shaking her head. A man like you, showing up here, bleeding? Do you want to get me killed? His lips twitched, a half smile, half grimace. If they come for you, he said, his voice low and deadly serious, I will end them. Something inside Zahara shattered and reformed in that instant. This man was danger and chaos, but in his rawness, he was the most real thing she had ever encountered. Her fingers, of their own volition, brushed against his. The spark was instantaneous, a live current that jolted through both of them. Junho leaned in slowly, his usual confidence stripped away. There was no mask, no savage facade, just a man laid bare, craving a salvation he'd only found in her. He cupped the back of her neck, his touch surprisingly gentle. Their lips met. It was soft at first, a tentative question. Then, as she gasped against him, her hands coming up to clutch his shoulders, it deepened into a desperate, hungry answer. He kissed her like a man starved for oxygen, like the world would end if he didn't taste her. It was a storm breaking after a lifetime of drought. A kiss filled with blood, rain, and the breathtaking scent of their shared perfume. When they finally pulled apart, breathless and trembling, Zahara's eyes were wide. "What? What was that?" she whispered, her lips still tingling. His gaze burned into hers, dark and raw with a truth he could no longer contain. The truth. Outside in the sheeting rain, unseen eyes watched from the shadows. A rival's voice, dripping with triumph, whispered into a radio. "He's bleeding, and he went to her. He cares for her. She's not just a weakness, she's his heart, and we know how to make him bleed now." The city outside glittered, cold and uncaring. But inside the perfumery, a different kind of fire had been lit. And with that kiss, Zahara's fate, for better or worse, was irrevocably tied to the Vipers. Junho did not take her back to his penthouse that night. The risk was too great. The Black Cobras were watching, and leading them directly to his home would be a death sentence for them both. Instead, he made a call. Within minutes, 2 of his most trusted men arrived in an unassuming sedan, their faces grim. They helped him into the back seat, and Zahara climbed in beside him, her mind reeling. They drove in silence to a safe house, a sleek, modern apartment in a nondescript high-rise. It was luxurious but sterile, devoid of any personal touch. A place, she realized, for hiding, not for living. Once inside, his men discreetly vanished into another room. The heavy door clicked shut, leaving them alone in the vast, silent living room. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a thick, heavy tension. Junho stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, his profile etched against the city lights, one hand pressed lightly against his bandaged side. "You should sit," Zahara said, her voice softer than she intended. "You need to rest." He didn't turn. "I brought danger to your doorstep." His voice was a low, gravelly rumble, laced with a self-loathing that startled her. "I am the worst kind of selfish. This wasn't your fault. It is." He turned then, and the raw anguish in his eyes stole the air from her lungs. This wasn't the fearsome Mafia boss. This was a man tormented. "Everything I touch turns to ash. My world is poison, Zahara, and I dragged you into it because I'm a weak, desperate man." He began to pace, a caged animal, his movements stiff with pain and frustration. "For months, I have been a ghost, a walking corpse. After the poisoning, the doctors said it was permanent. The part of me that makes a man was gone. I was hollow." He stopped, finally looking at her, his gaze burning with a terrifying intensity. "And then I walked into your shop, and you spoke, and for the first time I felt a spark, a flicker of life. I came back because I was starving for it. I was ready to buy every bottle in your store, to invent 100 reasons to be near you just to feel that fire again. Do you understand how pathetic that is?" Zahara stood her ground, her heart aching for him. "It's not pathetic. It's human. It's a liability," he roared, then winced, clutching his side. His voice dropped to a desperate whisper. "They saw it. They saw me with you, and now you're a target, because of my inability to stay away." He sank onto the edge of a large leather sofa, dropping his head into his hands. The picture of utter defeat. Zahara crossed the room and knelt before him. She gently pried his hands away from his face. "Look at me, Junho." He lifted his gaze, and the vulnerability there was more disarming than any show of power. "You think you dragged me into this? I'm not a child. I chose to let you in. I chose to help you when you were bleeding on my floor. I chose to kiss you back." She took a deep breath, her own boldness surprising her. "You keep talking about this fire, this life you feel around me. What does it feel like? Right now?" He stared at her, his breath catching. He could feel it, even through the pain, the shame, the fear. A steady, warm hum under his skin, a pull towards her that was as fundamental as gravity. It feels like coming home, he admitted, the confession torn from him. Like for the first time in years, my body is my own. And it wants you. It recognizes you. Then stop fighting it, she whispered, her hands moving to frame his face. Stop calling it a weakness. Maybe I'm not your liability. Maybe I'm your anchor. That was the final surrender. With a groan that was half pain, half relief, he pulled her up onto the sofa and into his arms. His lips found hers again, but this kiss was different. It wasn't the desperate, frantic kiss of before. It was slower, deeper, a profound exploration. It was a conversation without words. He kissed her with a reverence that made her tremble, his hands tracing the line of her jaw, the column of her neck, as if memorizing her. He buried his face in the curve of her neck, inhaling deeply, the scent of her skin and perfume becoming his new oxygen. Zahara. He breathed against her skin, his voice ragged. You don't understand. You are a miracle. He stood, lifting her effortlessly into his arms, ignoring the protest of his wounded side. He carried her to the bedroom, laying her down on the cool sheets as if she were the most precious, fragile thing he had ever held. What followed was not just passion. It was a reclamation. Every touch, every kiss, every shuddering breath was a reaffirmation of his life, his humanity. He was both terrifyingly powerful and heartbreakingly gentle. He worshipped her with his hands and his mouth, and when they finally joined, it was with a sense of devastating rightness that shook them both to the core. It was proof, not just of his physical healing, but of something far deeper. He was not broken. He was not a ghost. In her arms, with her scent enveloping him, with her whispers of encouragement in his ear, Junho Kang was finally, completely, whole. Later, as they lay tangled together in the dark, her head on his chest, he held her as if he never intended to let go. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her bare back. I will burn the world to the ground before I let anyone hurt you. He vowed into the silence, his voice quiet but absolute. Zahara lifted her head, meeting his gaze in the dim light. I don't want you to burn the world, she said softly. I just want you to stay right here. For the first time in his violent, chaotic life, Junho believed in a future beyond the next deal, the next battle. He tightened his arms around her. Where else would I go? He whispered. You are my life now. Outside, the city slept, unaware that the heart of its most dangerous man had been irrevocably captured, changing the balance of power forever. The Viper had found his cure, and he would protect it with a ferocity the world had never seen. Thank you for watching, my sweethearts. If this story touched your heart, welcome to the family. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next magical story. Now I want to hear from you. What's the most unforgettable love at first sight moment you've ever experienced? Pour your heart out in the comments below.